Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean, and today we are covering the emotional drivers behind chronic fatigue syndrome. This is yet another one of the diseases that I was diagnosed with. In fact, it was one of the first in my long list of syndromes. Sometimes referred to as myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS, is mainly characterized by severe fatigue. ME, or CFS, shares some features of other autoimmune illnesses, so it may be worth looking into the drivers behind just the other various autoimmune disorders. From the most general perspective, CFS is about boundaries and the ability or inability to say no. Quite often, somewhere in childhood, you received or perceived the message that it was not okay to say no, either because of fear of punishment, the possibility of abandonment, or that the love and acceptance that you so desperately craved would be taken away. So these people will learn to put the needs of others above their own. This leads to a feeling that they always need to be on guard and look out for bad things that could happen to them or the people that they love. Now, this hypervigilance is exhausting and highly depleting. And the inability to say no leads to constant overcommitment and the betrayal of self. And the way that is a betrayal of self is that because of those messages in childhood, we sort of disconnect from self. If we don't feel able to be heard, be respected, be autonomous in one sense, or to have agency, and we are in a relationship that maybe feels controlled or dominated or is domineering, then we tend to disconnect from self. We put power for our performance and how we feel and what happens in our life outside of this. And of course, that's very natural in childhood. Ideally, children would be respected and taught autonomy, would be modeled agency, and would be shown how to engage in proper emotion having and emotion processing. But as we all know, that often is not the case. Not because parents don't want to, because it's something that they don't have as a skill within themselves. So the betrayal of self comes from that process of outsourcing everything to someone else. And then we really do disconnect from our own intuition, our own gut, and what our body tells us and communicates to us. So over time, as we shift into adulthood, this leads to the feeling that we're being used by others, or that our needs are not being seen as important as the needs of others. And then that cycle just repeats. And there can be really deep moments of reflection and self-pity, kind of how did I get here? Life is hard. It's just this constant slog, right? And obviously that feels very heavy. That's very fatiguing. So frequently people who do CFS, they wish to be seen, respected, and even more important, that they hope to and wish to be accepted as yourself. But you seem to be in a constant state of having to change yourself to meet the needs of those around you. Remember from the earlier programming that others' needs are more important. So rather than being connected to your needs and being accepted as yourself, you don't even know who you are. You keep changing to fit the situations and the people and the needs around you. So though you want to be loved for yourself, there is no yourself happening. It's just a reflection of the needs around you. And again, that cycle is exhausting. After living this way for many years, those moments of clarity will often also bring resentment as you recognize that you have abandoned your own dreams or talents and desires to stay in alignment with or keep the peace or make happy those people around you, or at least you perceive that that's the case. You feel that you've had to sacrifice your true self in pursuit of helping others. You desire to change, to be free, but the weight of that responsibility feels too big. Because remember, you're so used to taking on everybody else's stuff that without getting rid of that stuff, you're also just adding the weight of the need to change and all that you need to do to be set free from that. Everything feels too big. The smallest amount of stress or exertion over time brings disproportionate fatigue. It all feels like too much, and that you're incapable of mustering up what it takes to make the changes that need to happen. This is where you find what's common to noticed as flares, right? Where you might be feeling like you're doing a little bit better, but then there's this flare and the exhaustion and the fatigue just gets bigger. It gets so incapacitating. So what happens there is that these are moments of, again, what we call secondary gains. It gives the sufferer an excuse to withdraw and stop trying because you're just too tired to go on. But underneath of that is a deep fear of failure and a fear that if you stop living for others, then they're going to abandon you and you will truly then be on your own, alone, unloved. In this sense, the fatigue is serving you. It keeps you from failing because it keeps you from trying. It's very common for this to start in early childhood. If you had a primary caregiver who was a perfectionist type of personality, or if they didn't safely allow for mistakes to be made in the home, if when something was spilled or broken or a mistake happened, if there was a very large or perceived reaction, that can really wire a child's system that it's not okay to make mistakes, that whatever you do will profoundly affect the other people, even the adults in your life. And what that then wires in is that you could never, ever measure up. And then you'll end up validation starved in this whole process. Because all children need validation. All children need that safe place to make mistakes and to see that they're loved anyway. They're loved unconditionally. If you perceive that you are unable to make mistakes, or that you might lose your parents' love or respect, then that wires the system for this sort of other-focused way of living. Now, this can also arise when one or more of your primary caregivers put you into a parental role early in your childhood. And this can happen even if you have like a disabled parent, a sick parent, or a parent who's emotionally or mentally unstable. It's also very common in children of addicts. Being given a caretaker role as a young child causes an imbalance in our self-love, self-care system. So in those circumstances, you're literally wired to put others above yourself at an age in which you're actually designed to be selfish, self-focused, and cared for. And it can lead to a great deal of dysfunction in how you engage in one another relationships. This is also common for what might be considered a gifted child who is living in a dysfunctional family. And that giftedness causes the family members to expect them to be able to handle all the family's problems. So they'll get kind of played out to be a hero or heroine role in the family. They may be a parent's counselor, or they may be put in between different family members or even siblings as the peacemaker. And as a child, this role, this feeling like the balance of the family relies on them, and them taking the brunt of responsibility when things go awry really shifts their perception, so that when things go wrong, they immediately take that on as something that they failed in, that they didn't do, that they were not aware enough and to catch and to make sure it didn't happen. And again, that's just another way of wiring in a hypervigilance. It can also be the case when physical or mental abuse is present in childhood. So all of this ends up facilitating a self-rejection program that impacts the immune system. It, in effect, works against them as if they were allergic to themselves and to the world. As a coping mechanism, they turn into possibly workaholics or achieveaholics or contribution fanatics who operate in a chronic fight-flight system of arousal. It's really common to find that the family of origin was possibly exploitive, like we talked about earlier, of overusing children in roles that they shouldn't be in or that they're put in too early. It can also be in a family that there's a lot of betrayal. So this could be if the parents who, of course, we think should love us and have unconditional acceptance, if we hear that a parent is unhappy with us or is blaming some of their problems on us as a child, or if secrets are betrayed, or if family members are played against one another in the family of origin, all of that betrayal can also speak to the hypervigilance. So, within all of this, what's happening is that you're not being taught or modeled self-care or self-soothing in these first years of life. Now, of course, there is no such thing as self-soothing in the early years of life before the age of 11. It's all co-regulating. And if you're co-regulating to adults that are dysregulated themselves, then you're in a constant state of central nervous system dysregulation. And again, that also causes this hypervigilance within the mind and body. If you were expected to care for parents or siblings as a child, then what happens is over the years, that becomes the way you handle most of your adult relationships too. And so after many, many years of that program, you are now collapsing under the weight of years of self-neglect. You might find that in adulthood, you attract romantic partners or friends or work environments that tend to be dominant and controlling. You may find that you're putting a lot of time and energy into them, but not receiving the same in return. You may seek for some semblance of control in your life, possibly being highly anal or particular about certain things that don't seem of much consequence to other people. That's because you're searching for a way to feel safe and stable. You're searching for that semblance of autonomy and agency that you've been craving since childhood. But you keep finding or creating environments that mimic early dysfunction. Now, because you are unaccustomed to caring for yourself or even connecting with your deep needs, then you're very out of touch with gut and with intuition. This does leave you vulnerable to those who seek to dominate, to control, to overtake, because you tend to miss red flags because you're disconnected from that inner wisdom that usually comes from our gut and from our intuition. So this makes you the possible victim of these perpetrators who are seeking to control. And what this does is pull you straight back into previous cycles, leaving you to believe there's really no way out of this, even in adulthood. Paradoxically, you may experience those flares of symptoms when you get close to breaking free from the cycle, because along with that comes a lack of confidence and experience with being involved in healthy reciprocal relationships. So the fear of failure becomes an overwhelming stress response. So then the body creates even more fatigue to give you the space and the time to rest and retreat from the threat of change. Subconsciously, it may feel safer to continue with what you know rather than to risk an even worse outcome. Now, if you or someone you know is dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome, it's important to remember that the feelings and manifestations of the disease are very real. Even though the fatigue is being created in your mind, the body absolutely feels it. Healing can be scary because it involves letting go of the painful experiences that shaped us. Change isn't always comfortable. In fact, it's often really challenging at first. But with the proper tools, this condition can be totally reversed. I am proof of that. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Please keep leaving those wonderful 5-star reviews and comment if there's a disease, symptom, or ailment you would like to hear covered. For those of you who are looking for a little more support on your mind change journey, we invite you to join a book club and get discounts on courses and retreats when you finish the book club. There are many book clubs operating around the world, or you can start your own. Find out more information at our website, mindchange.com/book club. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the Mind Change podcast, where we are endeavoring to change the world, one mind at a time.